Built as gargantuan tombs of shining white limestone, the pyramids were designed to hide dark secrets of the dead for eternity. For thousands of years, they have prompted fantastic myths and legends, as well as real and baffling scientific riddles. How were these mausoleums constructed, hundreds of feet high, true to within inches? Why was a nation devoted to housing its dead? Who were the men who hauled billions of tons of stone? Now, science is beating down the pyramids' defenses, shattering ancient myths, and revealing the truth. The pyramids of ancient Egypt stand like giant sentinels watching over the city of Cairo. Built more than 2,000 years before the birth of Christ, these stone giants continue to mystify and captivate archaeologists seeking to understand their origins and purpose.
I think Egypt has such a grip on us because they had access to stone, and with that stone, they built the world's first skyscrapers. There's something about us that we see in that.
The pyramid builders left no record of how they erected these massive superstructures, and thousands of years of myth and legend have hidden their real purpose. The only clues are the pyramids themselves. Scientists must study the stones to discover how these extraordinary buildings were constructed, and to learn who built them using simple, primitive technologies.
These are very sophisticated monuments. The Great Pyramid is the high-tech of antiquity.
The scale of the achievement is astonishing. The Great Pyramid is 481 feet tall and is made up of 2.3 million blocks, some weighing as much as 50 tons. The whole structure weighs almost 6 million tons. That's the equivalent of 16 Empire State Buildings. For 38 centuries, it was the tallest building on Earth. What's more, it's an incredibly precise piece of engineering. The 755-foot sides vary in length by less than 2 inches. It's not just the exterior building that's extraordinary. Inside is a complex of passageways and chambers built from one of nature's hardest rocks. The stonework is so precise that even a credit card cannot slip between the blocks, all constructed by a people who hadn't discovered the wheel.
The accuracy of the Great Pyramid is something that makes me stand in awe.
The first Egyptologists tried to blast their way to the truth with dynamite. They forced their way into the pyramid's secret chambers. But they may have destroyed more than they uncovered.
Dynamite especially might have obliterated clues left behind by the ancient Egyptians, telling us more about the pyramids or how they were built.
Now archaeologists are using the latest technology to search for wonders hidden deep within the stones.
I really actually believe that the burial chamber of that king is still hidden inside the pyramid.
But for other archaeologists, it's the buildings themselves that are the true wonder.
The greatest mystery about the pyramids is not secret chambers, it's how the Egyptians managed to build them with the technology they had.
The ancient Egyptians didn't master pyramid building in one leap. It took long years of trial and error, and one near disaster for them to evolve from building simple mud constructions to the Great Pyramid at Giza. The first pyramids were built on the west bank of the River Nile around 2600 BCE. The earliest design was the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, possibly the oldest stone building on Earth. Rising 204 feet from the desert sands, this was a breakthrough in the history of construction. It didn't have smooth sloping sides, but instead rose in a series of levels or steps. The first flat-sided true pyramids were built 60 years later by the pharaoh Snefru. His son Khufu built the Great Pyramid, the first and largest of the 3 pyramids at Giza. And then, a series of smaller, highly decorated pyramids were built at Saqqara. How the Egyptians built these giant superstructures using the simple technology of the time is an ancient mystery. The first challenge was to survey the site and mark out the pyramid in the correct alignment. They chose the site with care to ensure that the bedrock was capable of supporting many millions of tons of limestone. The ancient architects then marked out the building so that each side was aligned to the points of the compass: north, south, east, and west. Today, we would use digital compasses and laser sighting equipment, but the ancient Egyptians had none of this technology. Instead, some experts think they looked to the skies. By observing where the polar stars rise and set, it's possible to calculate true north. First, the architects built a semicircular wall to act as a flat horizon. On this wall, they could mark the rising and setting points of a particular star as it rotated around north in the night sky. A line drawn exactly midway between these marks would point due north. Using just this low-tech method, the Great Pyramid was aligned with breathtaking accuracy. It is off true north by less than a 20th of a degree. Engineer and pyramid rider Robert Boval has aligned modern buildings himself. He is astounded by the accuracy achieved by the ancient Egyptians.
It beats me how they did it. I've set out buildings with optical instruments, with the aid of cranes to place the stones, and sometimes I don't get them that accurate.
Having calculated due north, the architects plotted out an alignment line that forms one side of the pyramid's footprint. They then marked out the remaining 3 sides using measuring rods and cords. With the plan of the pyramid now set, the engineers then carved a level base out of the bedrock to support the giant structure. A perfectly horizontal foundation was needed for a precise and stable pyramid. British engineer Dennis Stocks is an expert in ancient Egyptian construction techniques. His work has unraveled many of the mysteries of pyramid building. Modern foundations are leveled with lasers and spirit levels. Stocks believes that the Egyptians used water.
In order to get the pyramid base nice and flat and level, the ancient Egyptians used a channel. It's like this one here, only it would stretch all the way along 755 feet, the whole side of the pyramid. And then they would put some water in, and it would act as a kind of spirit level. All he has to do is follow the line of the water along it, and then he can be sure that the pyramid base will be truly level and truly horizontal.
Stocks believes that such a water trench could have been built on a massive scale along the whole edge of the pyramid. In this way, the engineers could ensure the whole base was level. But to check that all 2.3 million blocks were kept level as the pyramid grew upwards, the Egyptians used another ingenious device.
The tool I'm using is made of wood, and it's called the A-frame. All it is 2 pieces of wood joined together at 90 degrees at the top with a crossbar and a hanging plumb line to calibrate it for use It is placed on a flat surface of water, and then a line, which you can see there, is marked right behind the hanging plumb line, so that you know when you test it on a surface and the hanging plumb line coincides with the mark, we know that it is showing a truly horizontal flat surface.
With the design laid out and the site level, construction could now begin. For this, the Egyptians needed stone, millions of tons of stone. But how did they quarry such incredible amounts without the aid of dynamite, jackhammers, or even iron tools? During the ancient Egyptian Old Kingdom, 18 major pyramids were completed in a 500-year period. They contain 1/3 of a billion cubic feet of stone that had to be quarried, cut, and transported to the sites. Even for modern engineering companies with modern technology, this would be a daunting task. Yet the ancient Egyptians managed it with the most rudimentary tools. Dennis Stocks is traveling to Tura near Cairo, where much of the high-quality limestone used in the pyramids was quarried. He believes the Egyptians cut this stone using a soft metal, copper. Stocks has built replica copper chisels based on ancient artifacts found in Egypt.
By using those, I feel that I am as close as I can get within the mind of ancient Egyptian workers and how they felt.
But copper is a soft, malleable metal which bends and blunts easily. How can it be used to cut limestone?
Now, the tools that I have in my hand at the moment are the first ones that the ancient craftsmen would use. And this one is a mallet, which is used to strike this copper tool, which is shaped into a chisel. And in order to do this, you lay the chisel against the stone at an angle, position the mallet, and then strike. Quite hard blows, and you will see big chips of stone coming away. That's all right for rough working, but we have another copper chisel which can be used for more finer working in order to get much less stone off at a time, but will bring the surface closer towards the surface which is totally flat.
Stock's research shows that it's possible to carve limestone blocks using soft copper chisels. And it turns out that the Egyptians were the unwitting recipients of some good fortune. Detailed chemical analysis of ancient tools shows that Egyptian copper wasn't pure. It contained small traces of arsenic. By a lucky chance, this impurity holds the copper crystals together and actually makes this copper tougher than its pure form. This fluke of chemistry helped the Egyptian stonemasons quarry most of the 2.3 million limestone blocks in the Great Pyramid. The pyramids are mostly made of the relatively soft rock limestone. But the Egyptians also used a much tougher kind of stone, granite. They used this hard, beautifully colored stone for the most important sections of the design, such as the king's chamber within the Great Pyramid. And copper chisels have absolutely no effect on this rock. Sophisticated modern quarrying tools can cut through granite, but the Egyptians had not even learned how to forge iron. Generations of archaeologists could not solve the puzzle of exactly how they cut these 50-ton granite blocks. But now, experimental archaeology is beginning to explain this technological mystery. Dennis Stocks thinks he has the answer. He believes the Egyptians did use copper saws, and not just ordinary saws. They didn't even have teeth.
This material here is very hard granite, and to cut this you need a special tool, and this is a copper saw, but it's toothless, it's got no teeth at all. And you say, well, what's going to do the cutting? Well, it's sand, but it's the quartz crystals within the sand which embed themselves into the softer copper. And because the saw's dragging those crystals backward and forth within the slot, that actually does the cutting. And slowly, bit by bit, the stone is cut right the way through.
Quartz crystals in the sand are so hard that they gradually grind through the solid granite. But using these saws, the ancient Egyptians could only have cut granite at a rate of 2 cubic inches an hour. It still would have taken 4 months to carve out the sarcophagus inside the Great Pyramid. With soft copper and a cutting edge provided by arsenic and sand, the Egyptians cut vast quantities of rock. They had to then assemble these blocks into a monument that could stand the test of time. But what made the Egyptians decide to build a pyramid in the first place? Why did they choose this now iconic shape? They were looking for a stable form. Like a mound of gravel, the pyramid is supported by a wide base and low center of gravity. More than 2/3 of the weight is in the bottom third of its height. But the design wasn't just about engineering. It was also influenced by their beliefs.
When people want to go up, to do so and have stability, a mound is very stable. But of course, there is a symbology in all of this.
There may be several mystical influences behind the pyramid shape. One explanation looks at the worship of a mystical stone known as the Benben stone. Nobody knows where this legendary stone originated. Some think it was a meteorite. It has long since vanished, but the pyramidions, or capstones, that form the very top of the pyramids are modeled on the original pyramid-shaped Benben stone. Could this be the reason why pyramids are built in their distinctive form? But with the sun playing such a key role in Egyptian religion at the time, there is another possibility. Maybe the sun itself was the key.
The pyramid can be seen as a stone representation of a sun ray coming down from the heavens.
When the sun emerges from behind clouds, the beam created can sometimes resemble a pyramid. So a stone representation of a sunbeam is a possibility. But perhaps it was simply the pure geometrical form of a pyramid that appealed to the Egyptians. Ironically, the first pyramid, the step pyramid, didn't have smooth sloping sides. It rose in 6 separate layers. It was Pharaoh Snefru, the pioneer of pyramids, 60 years after the step pyramid was built, who created the first smooth-sided, true pyramid. This was a radical new concept, and its success would rest on a critical engineering decision. At what angle should the sides rise? The steeper the angle, the taller and heavier the pyramid would be. If they made it too steep, it might be too heavy for the foundations. Snefru's architects settled on an angle of 55 degrees. At first, things went well, but halfway through construction, cracks began to appear in the pyramid's internal chambers. According to a survey by Italian archaeologists Marigiolio and Rinaldi, the pyramid is built on soft, slaty clay. Only the edges rest on a solid stone foundation. As the pyramid rose, this soft core sank under the weight. The architects had to come up with an answer, or the pyramid might collapse. Construction stopped. Eventually, their dramatic solution changed the whole direction of the build. The architects decreased the angle of slope from 55 degrees to 43 degrees. This reduced the height of the pyramid by 100 feet and the weight by more than 400,000 tons. The engineer's mistake probably angered the pharaoh, but their solution was a success. 4,500 years later, the bent pyramid, as it's now known, still stands, though with its slightly unusual shape. Major pyramids would never again be built at such a steep angle. For his next pyramid, Snefru's architects were understandably cautious. They built the Red Pyramid at just 45 degrees. It has the shallowest angle of any of the Egyptian pyramids, and it's still standing. It's the oldest true smooth-sided pyramid in Egypt today. After this success, the architects grew more confident. They now built steeper and steeper, culminating in the angle of the Great Pyramid. Its sides climb at an angle of slightly less than 52 degrees, rising to a summit of 480 feet. But how did they manage to maneuver 2.5-ton blocks to such an incredible height without the crane or the block and tackle? It was a challenge to the ancient Egyptians, and still remains a mystery to modern archaeologists. Egyptologist Mark Lehner has spent 30 years studying the pyramids hands-on.
My approach to the question was, where are the quarries? What kind of a ramp can you get from the quarry to the pyramid in a functional slope?
Lehner and almost all Egyptologists believe that some kind of ramp was used to raise the stone blocks. The type of ramp remains a mystery. Did they approach the pyramid straight on? Zigzag up one side? Or spiral around it?
It's not a problem that's been totally solved, and I've given my suggestions. I've tried to base them in the landscape, but a lot of it is still inference.
Because the ramps were dismantled once the pyramid was complete, only fragments of evidence are available to archaeologists. But it was ramps and sheer muscle power that allowed millions of blocks to reach the summit. Once in position, the builders faced a new task. The blocks had to be fitted together. Surprisingly, in such a precise build, a large proportion of the internal stones were just roughly finished. The gaps between them were filled with rubble and gypsum mortar.
In between the blocks were stuffed lots of limestone chippings mixed with a huge dollops of mortar. And it sets just like modern concrete.
But every stone that would be visible when the build was completed was placed with amazing precision. In the Great Pyramid, the blocks of the burial chamber fit precisely. The sides of these blocks had to be almost perfectly flat to make these astonishing joins. This precision engineering was achieved using the most rudimentary of tools.
Yes, we'll use this rods and string tool in order to find out whether the surface is truly flat. And by using a third rod, which is the same length as the other two rods joined by the string, which is now pulled very taut, we can see if it just slips under. Now, we've got a bit of a high spot there. Now, in ancient times, they would mark that simply by putting some red ochre on, just to remind the workers where to go to, and check along the length of the string.
The ancient mason would use the rods and string to spot imperfections and then mark them with red ochre to show where more work was needed.
Using two further tools, this one being a flint scraper and this one being a sandstone rubber, now we can use the marks as a guide to scrape away the high point like so. And it's obvious that as you scrape, the mark disappears, and with it, of course, the high spot.